So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Trends webinar series. Today's topic, increasing accountability with your safety program. Let's just start by doing some introductions to who we have here in the room. So we are joined by Steve Heinen. He is the pioneer and creator of the P4 People risk management process and has over 40 years of experience in the risk management industry, which many of you may not know. He's also an author and the writer of the Work Comp Playbook for Employers, which has sold over 3,600 copies and is really designed to help organizations implement a proven risk management process. My name is Zachary Rosenthal. I have over 15 years of experience handling claims. I worked in the ACMED arena, so it's given me a perspective of what's needed by the employer, by the insurer, and also the company. So it's allowed me to work with all sides of the business to managing workers' comp claims. And I also am excited to put on this slide my new professional headshot. So I'm glad to show this off here. We just had some new photos taken at EIG, and I think we've all been trying to use them as much as possible. I also put them on social media, and it became my most liked post of all times. It even beat out my photo of me playing pickleball with Jamie Foxx. So this was a very impactful photo. So just some housekeeping before we begin. This hour is going to be certified for one general HRCI and SHRM credit. You will need to be in attendance for the full hour in order to receive your credit. Zoom does track your in and out time, so please stick with us till the end. Also, during the session, there's going to be 2 keywords that we give out. You will need these 2 keywords in order to receive your CEU credit. So please write it down when we get to that slide. Because there is going to be a survey evaluation, we're going to give you the link at the end of the session. You do need to complete the survey eval to receive your credit and also input those 2 keywords. So please pay attention. Also, if you're not getting the CEU credits, please still complete the program eval. It really helps us determine what content to offer and how our sessions are. So let's talk about the journey of where we've been taking you. So we began this emerging trends journey on August with our introduction to people risk management. And this was all about leadership because leadership is the foundation to what we've been talking about. You have to have strong leadership in your organization in order to affect your claims. Then in September, we got into P1 and P2, which is pre-hire and post-offer, talking about how to reduce risk with new hires. Now it's October and we're talking prevention. So the focus today is accountability and safety, which is really what we're going to get deep into in a moment. And then November, we're going to go into claims management. So how do you manage these claims? So this is P4 post-claim. Then in December, we're going to be talking about fleet safety. And then in January, we're going to be getting into cyber and employment practices and how this relates to P4. And just to note, we do archive all of these trainings on our website. So if you go to eigrisk.com, you can view any of the previous sessions to refresh yourself on the topic and also share with anyone who may benefit from these topics.
All right, I guess it's my turn. You know, what Zach said over 40 years, what he said nicely is I'm really old. And I had one of the younger team members introduce me a couple months ago as the Chief Perspective Officer. I think that's a nice way of saying, you know, I'm the one with the most gray hair. I hope when you leave this session today, you will gain a lot of perspective on things. I hope you'll carry that perspective, maybe engage with the EIG risk advisor or engage within your own organization. But the purpose of these trainings is really to spark thoughts within your company and create engagement, to do something, to take action. So as a Chief Perspective Officer, I'm going to give you a load of perspective. I've been doing this. I like Zach said, 3,600 books. I've sold almost 7,000 books. I think what he meant was 3,600 people have actually read the book. So maybe I'm batting 50% on people that have read it. But I do kind of want to talk about, just for a second, the journey that Zach just talked about, this building foundation. And I'm a Maxwell certified leadership coach. About 15 years ago, I kind of hit the wall with some large clients. I just wasn't able to move the needle on their safety. And rather than blame them, I dug deep and I figured out what I wasn't doing is I just wasn't leading it correctly. So I really leaned hard about 15 years ago into leadership, and it is the foundation. And I want you to think about as we go through this P4 journey, pre-hire, post-offer prevention, and post-claim, the foundation is leadership. And then it starts with the time you hire someone, the pre-hire and post-offer. Today, we're going to be talking about prevention. What happens after you hire them until they have the claim? And then next month, we're going to talk about, okay, what do you do when you have the claim? Now, you guys have heard me, if you've been in the previous sessions, say P4 is like the four tires on a car. And I would say that the chassis of the car is really leadership, but the four tires are all important. And if one tire gets a flat, if you don't have a good hiring process, you're going to have a flat. If you do a great job on the hiring process, but you don't have good ongoing safety, or you do those things well, and then you pass the claim over to the insurance carrier and you don't have an action plan. So all these things build upon each other, but today we're going to focus on safety. And I talk a lot about accountability, and you guys heard me in the last session. I surveyed 153 HR managers. I was speaking at an HR conference, a SHRM conference here in Georgia. And I asked the question, do you think accountability is going up, down, or staying about the same? 91% of the HR managers said accountability is going down. 9% said staying the same. And nobody said getting better. And really, when we talk about the post offer of the new hire safety orientation, and we spent time on the three-prong process, now we're passing it on to, okay, we've set the tone for them. Now we've got to show them every day we care about people and profits. And so to really have accountability, you've got to have it at all three levels. So why is safety knowledge so important? You know, I've just put some bullet points on there. These are things anecdotal, you guys all know. New employees follow the leader. If you have a good safety program, employees take ownership versus management having to own safety. I tell safety managers all the time, you're not the safety manager, you're the safety leader. The safety managers are really the supervisors and even the employees. Also, if you have a good safety culture, you have better retention. And trust me, with a good culture, they'll weed out the bad apples. I asked another question. Have you ever hired a workers' comp claim to these same 153 HR managers? 89% said yes. We had a bad apple. If you've got a good safety culture, you'll weed out the poor performers. You're also going to get better return to work outcomes, fewer injuries, definitely less attorney involvement, and a lower cost of risk. So what we talk about from an accountability is really accountability at three levels. And when we go into a company, you know, we're insurance brokers. I'm the risk manager, but we're all insurance brokers. And what we tend to do is deal with the C level. And we talk to the C level about safety. And, you know, the brokers typically don't get past the corner office. We deal with finance and we deal with HR, but the claims happen out in the plant. If they're a contractor, they happen out in the field. Certainly, we've got to have accountability for management. That's a start for us as a broker. If you're a prospect and we meet with you, we start with a discussion about what kind of support are we going to get from management, but then we quickly go to supervisors. And we're starting a leadership academy in January. We do supervisor leadership training. We think it's a game changer. We do 2 sessions, and then we've got a kind of a train the trainer. But what we're going to do is we're going to offer monthly webinars on leadership for our clients to participate in, to kind of show supervisors how to manage. And if you guys are employers, you know that supervisors generally are supervisors just because of the length of time on the job, not because they know a thing about leadership. And again, you've heard, go ahead.
Yeah, no, Steve, to make that point is that I see it says providing safety trainings on there, but a supervisor may know safety, but do they know how to deliver the message to employees? Are they a train the trainer? You know, you need to make sure that they're delivering it the proper way. So that goes back to leadership.
That's a great point, Zach. A great point. You know, when we talk about our new hire going in post offer, what we talked about last month was the third prong as a supervisor walking the employee through the job and going through all the stuff they just learned and pointing it out to them. but that doesn't stop after the first day. It has to continue throughout the life of the claim. So this accountability for supervisors is probably one of the things we lean on hardest, because we think it makes a difference. You know, you've heard me quote the statistic, but the Work Comp Research Institute says if you don't have good leadership at the supervisor level, the employee's 2 to 3 times, 2 to 300% more likely to get an attorney. And if they get an attorney, cost goes up 350%. So if you're intentional about wanting to reduce your cost, particularly in workers' comp, you've got to do leadership training for your supervisors. And then we
I
move.
want to clarify that a little bit,
Yeah.
Steve. It's not only for workers' comp, for GL and auto. A lot of it has to do with your leadership also. How you filter people, how you train them, how you mentor them to get better. As a former safety person for the last 30 years, I always thought, how do I increase safety on a project or safety in the office? Oh, let's hire more safety people. That's not the answer. And I know there's a lot of people here listening saying, wow, we need to do more safety stuff. Let me get a consultant. It's about training up your leadership. It all starts there. Not only insurance rates, but we had a company call us the other day where they had a very unfortunate accident, and it was a simple training that they needed to do that they didn't do. So leadership is in charge of everything. If people are getting hurt in your organization and you're having accidents, don't look at the people, look at the leadership.
That's a great point. And you know, just to carry that further, when you do spend 10 minutes a month with your supervisor team and you're talking about leadership, you know, also talk about what's going on. You know, that claim Eddie reference, you know, that client will learn by religion change going forward. That's called a lagging indicator. Hey, man, we have a bad thing happen. Let's change our policy moving forward. Yeah, the guy was severely injured. Let's change it going forward. Leading indicator is when you actually have your supervisor employees actually looking in the workplace and you look at the near misses and things going on and you say, hey, let's catch this before we have a bad claim. But again, if they don't understand leadership, your supervisors, they're not going to be able to effectively implement any safety program. They just won't be able to. They won't be able to communicate it and they won't be able to lead by example. So if you want a good safety program, certainly got to build accountability for your supervisors. And then we go over to the employees. And again, remember that survey, 91% said less accountable, 9% about the same. Nobody said more accountable. Um, you know, the workforce has changed. It's changed a lot since COVID. Everybody on here is nodding their head when I say, don't you wish employees would be more accountable? There's a way to drive accountability. There is. You know, I coach a lot of basketball in my life, and you know, I coach our varsity in the off season. And um, my ability to get accountability from every kid on the team, from the best kid to the worst kid, I think is what made our team so good. We didn't have all the best players, but we won. You know, we were 25-6 senior year, and won our region, and you know, did some great things. I think the reason is we got the best out of everybody. And that's really what you want to do with your program is how can you get the best out of employees? And the way you do it is make them understand the why behind safety. You've got to make supervisors understand the why behind leadership. You've got to get the managers to understand the why behind the whole program. Okay. And so we're going to talk about some of these things and we're going to lean into them a little bit. And again, what I hope this will do within your company is I hope what it'll do is it will get a discussion going on how can we improve. So Zach, I want to launch a polling question. Well, we asked this question, who impacts the safety culture? We actually asked that question in the last session, in the leadership session. And this is the statistics that we got. Again, asking who impacts the culture of safety managers, supervisors, and employees. And this is what everyone said. Management 24%, employees 33%, and the employees 43%. Okay. They all have an impact. I guess we could argue the management, we could argue that it's the supervisors, and we could argue that it's the employees. But it's interesting when you go to a company, again, when we as insurance brokers go to a company, what we do is we ask management, hey man, how's your safety program? They go, it's great. Okay, we just write it down in our narrative, send it to the underwriter, get a quote. We dig a little bit deeper on it and really go into detail and find out where we're at each level. Okay, we've got assessments that we talked about those in our leadership. But I want to ask a first time question. I did this in the first webinar yesterday. I did this training and I said, whose perception of safety matters most? The first one was who impacts safety the most, but whose perception of safety? In other words, if we ask a company, we ask the management, we ask the supervisors, or we ask the employees about the safety culture, whose perception of the culture matters the most? Zach, you want to launch a survey? Putting them under
All right, we
Okay,
got the poll up
the
already.
poll has launched. We have around 30 more seconds to respond. So put in your answers now.
I got to write these down.
We like to keep this interactive.
Well, I like using these statistics because I'll use it in another webinar that we'll do.
All right, 10 more seconds, and then we're going to close it. Okay. So here are the results. We have 36% say managers, 11% say supervisors, and 53% say employees.
I will tell you my answer on this one. I think the other one is very subjective. I have a decided opinion on it. It's the employee, employee's perception. And I told the story yesterday in a workshop I did. I had a client who had one of the most intentional safety cultures of any client I've worked with. And I was leading some training and had a big group of their employees. They did concurrent training every year, brought their employees. So I was one of the people who came back. So I had probably, I don't know, maybe 100 in the room. And I said, if you guys are injured and have a workers' comp claim, do you feel like you'll be taken care of? And somebody in the back of the room raised their hand and said, heck no, I know I'll be screwed if I have a claim. And I was kind of taken aback because we had a very intentional culture, took great care of the people. Asked her why. She said, well, I've only been here a week, but the last place I worked, and she just went on and on what a bad place it was. So, you know, the employee's perception when they come in day one is probably not of your company before they come work. It's from their past experiences. Then they come in day one, they go through your new hire orientation. That's why we're so intentional in our three-pronged process. When you bring someone new in, set the tone, but they also see it after the first day. Was it just lipstick on a pig the first day? They give us all this great orientation, but now we're working. They don't give a crap about us. It's just production, get the job done. So I think the employee's perception matters most. I've got a simple employee perception survey. I kind of modeled a little bit after the National Safety Council, but I created it years ago. It's got 30 questions. I've done hundreds of thousands of assessments. And so I want to share with you, this is the employee's perception. And I would say because it's such a big body of group, it speaks probably for most companies. Before I get to it, I forgot we had this slide here. Employees' perception is reality. It's also very expensive and it's not set in stone. If they have a perception about a company, they don't care about us, they're going to only look after themselves. You can change it, but you've got to be intentional. And here's what I know. You know, when we get to the next webinar next month about claims, if you don't connect with them in your regular safety training and show and create trust with the employee before they're injured, it's impossible for the adjuster to create trust after they're injured. So we got this perception survey that I just mentioned, and I want to go through some key insights. One is asking the employee, do you consider the job to be safe? 43% said yes. The majority said no or unsure.
Now, talk a little bit about these employee perception surveys and how we do them. Are they anonymous?
Yes, and a great question. Normally, particularly with a new client, we don't recommend in the first year We kind of organizationally want to put some programs in place to kind of ramp up the culture. So we don't usually start with a new client. That's usually like the second year. But we've got it, very simple, simple survey, QR code, anonymous. You've got to be able to show the employee it's anonymous. They got to understand it's anonymous. We actually have a question in that survey that says, were you intimidated by your supervisor? Like, did they tell you you better give good marks on everything? So we feel like we've got it tested where we get candid feedback. But that's a great question, Eddie, is asking them. Because if you don't ask them, their perception is kind of the reality of the workforce. And their perception and your existing employees will impact new hires. If their perception is it's a good safety culture, they're going to impact them. If the perception is bad, they're going to tell the employees, the new hires. So, I think just asking them what they think. And so these insights are, just some of the questions from the 30 questions. I picked out 3 for management, 3 for supervisors, 3 for employees.
We
But
got over 100 companies here on this webinar, uh, and they're probably listening and thinking, what company size would this be for these kind of employee surveys?
you know, I would say probably typically companies I'm doing it for typically have more than 100 employees. But I have seen companies with over 50. If they're 10 or 15 employees, probably just sit down and have lunch with them. 15 company employee, the owner of the company is probably working hand in hand with the employees. They probably have a different relationship, but as they grow, I've got clients that only have 15 employees at a location, but maybe they have 50 locations. That's challenging. And what you'll find is, first of all, we just did, Eddie and I just did supervisor leadership training for a restaurant chain. I think they have 15 or 20 restaurants. And, what you'll find is some of those restaurants have really good leadership with their managers, some don't. And I bet if we correlate, this is a prospect, if we correlate their losses to the leadership, I bet there's a correlation. I bet when we get their loss runs, and because we did a supervisor inventory of the supervisors. So, the company size, probably 50 or more, really starts getting traction over 100 employees. But think about this question: when you're hired, do you get adequate training to perform the job safely? Only 35% said yes. Okay, if that's the case with your company, your costs are going to be too high. And that's not just, by the way, that's not just, as Eddie said, on workers' comp. It's fleet, it's cyber, it's GL, it's employment practices. So I want you to think about that. Is management committed to safety? That's a big percentage saying no or maybe. I mean, to me, in this question, the maybes or no's. They're either yes or no, but we put a maybe in there to kind of give employees that they're not quite sure it's anonymous. We give them an escape hatch. That maybe is really a no. So the majority are saying no, they're not committed. Then we ask questions about supervisors. Do you respect your supervisor? Only 38% have said yes. Regarding safety, does your supervisor treat everyone the same? 39% yes. My supervisor mostly gives me positive feedback, negative feedback, 50-50. Again, supervisors can't just call people out when they see something wrong. They've got to recognize things that go right or they lose credibility.
And I think that goes back to leadership training, because you have to train your supervisors on how to properly and effectively communicate with your employees.
Yeah,
Most supervisors, as we covered before in the first training, most supervisors have been put in that role strictly because they were good employees and they
that's
just
right.
went up the ranks.
That's right. We really put them in a position to fail because they're good employees and they don't suddenly become a bad employee. They're just bad leaders. And you put them in a leadership role and then the employees hate them and then they get ticked off for some reason. And I don't know why. I've been doing leadership training a long time. For some reason, people that get put in a supervisor position that had a bad supervisor ahead of them, follow the bad supervisor. And they get their badge and they now it's their chance. I don't know why that's the case. You'd think they would say, man, I don't want to be like that guy. But that's what we talk about is we talk about those things and help them understand their role. Okay. So the employees, do all your coworkers follow safety rules? 81% said no. I want to, I had a claim, this is probably about 8 or 9 years ago. It really made an impact on me because I went down right after the accident and it was gruesome. But a guy was changing a tire in a shop and he didn't soak the rim. He was taking a shortcut and it blew. And it blew his head off, literally. Brains were on the ceiling, they were everywhere. It was gruesome. I mean, when I went there, it was awful. It looked like a crime scene. And there was this employee sitting over there that witnessed the accident. He was about 15 feet from him, and he was just shaking because it easily could have, that tire could have blown. It would have killed him. It just went up instead of over. And I talked to him about it, and he said, "Man," he said, "that guy was not doing the job right." He goes, I knew it, but that guy'd been here for like 12 years. I've only been here a few weeks. I didn't want to say anything. I don't want to call him out." And I said, "Do you wish you had of? He'd still be alive." And, I think when we look at this, we're not trying to create a bunch of tattletales, but certainly if you go talk to an employee after a bad claim that witnessed it and they could have prevented it, it's damaging to them. They have psych issues from it because they wish they had said something. So creating an environment where you have employees empowered if somebody's doing something stupid. I mean, we all do. We all are not on our game every day. It's just most of us work in an office, not in a safety sensitive position, but and we have bad days. Okay. But if you're working near equipment, you're a contractor, you're a manufacturer, you're driving a vehicle, you got to be on your game. So key insight number two.
And also just with that, if employees stop following safety rules and your leadership does not enforce it, it's contagious because they see, oh, I can get away with it. Other coworkers stop wearing PPE, stop doing things, and it just spreads. So that's another reason why you need to have that leadership involved to minimize anyone from doing things wrong.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Zach. Um, you know, you asked the employer, are you concerned that another, so remember the last question is, have you seen them do something unsafe? And this question says, are you concerned that a coworker's unsafe action may injure you or others? 45% said yes, 22% sometimes. I mean, again, if this is the culture of your company and you want to reduce cost, you gotta address these questions. Have you ever witnessed a coworker under the influence of drugs or alcohol? 85%. Yes.
Yeah, this one really shocks me. And this is the importance of having a Florida drug-free workplace because that's how you control people from being under the influence. So at the minimum, if you can't be a drug-free workplace, at least do reasonable suspicion and post-accident testing. Because if they were under the influence when they had an injury, that claim can be denied.
But if your supervisors know the guy's high or know the guy's under the influence of alcohol and they let him work anyway, you probably are going to lose your defense on that claim. Because
Yeah.
if you willfully let them come to work stoned, I had a metal worker and they were adding a new addition to the plant, and the president, the vice president of the company were walking, showing it to it, and it was during lunch, and these two guys come rattling out of the woods, and they just reeked of marijuana. And as a risk manager for the company, I was waiting for their reaction, and they said, "Man, we probably shouldn't, but these guys work a lot better when they're high. Like they get more production when they're high." And I'm like, "Yeah, but when they have a claim, don't get upset at the insurance company when they have to pay it, because what they're going to say is, hey, you saw them." Their claimant attorney is going to say, "Didn't you see them coming out of the woods smoking pot?" And
We got Richard asking and saying, did that employee not feel comfortable discussing it with the supervisor? Do they have the wrong culture?
yeah, I think there's a lot of intimidation. There's a lot of pressure put on supervisors, okay, by management, production, production, production. And so when we talk about all these things, whether it's drugs or reporting of claims, if management goes, we got to quit having so many damn claims. They don't quit having claims. The supervisors quit reporting them. Say, go back to work. we got to quit having claims, get back to work. And that claim usually blows up and becomes a big claim. So again, I think with anything, it's having a conversation. With the management, we sit down and have a conversation. What kind of culture do you want to have? With the supervisors, we sit down with them and we talk about leadership and explain what leadership is, and then we reel it back into how it impacts safety and claims. Also, by the way, it's going to impact production and turnover. I remember I did the training about 5 years ago for this large poultry producer, and they said, since you've done our training, our turnover has reduced by a significant percentage. And just because the leaders, the supervisors are treating the employees better. So when we talk about how we do this, how do you improve your organization's safety knowledge? Of course, I believe it starts with employee accountability, leadership training, and then management supporting all these things. Okay, we talked about
I'm sorry to interrupt again, Steve, but we have Rolando asking a very good question. It says, how do I make a business case for safety investments to a CFO and CEO? The culture starts at the top.
that is such a great question. I would say call Eddie. Call one of us. I think, we're insurance brokers. We don't control. I think the clients, what we do with this training and stuff is give you the pricing done, but our job is to go to the market and get you insurance quotes. So we've got a lot of interaction with the C-level, with the CFO about the cost of premium, the cost of risk. So I think we're, and at EIG, we put such a heavy lean on risk management. I think it's kind of our role to help take that case to the management team to get that investment. We're just guides. But if you look at my references and Eddie's references, who's been doing it a long time, we're good guides. Our job is to facilitate. I find a lot of times we come in, the safety managers not getting the help or resources. It's our job to build a plan that will get the CFO to invest. Sometimes we'll get the insurance company to co-invest. Sometimes as a broker, we take some of our commission and co-invest it. But, we put skin in the game. So great.
And I think going back to our next webinar that we're doing on claim management, we're going to easily see on how claims and injuries impact the bottom line. So when you're talking to a CFO and a CEO and you want to do a presentation on accountability, you can show them the actual numbers on how safety culture can save money and save lives.
Yeah, I think we do it every day. It's easy for us. I've done it with hundreds of organizations. EIG has got thousands of clients. So I think it's our experience that we're able to bring to the table to help the leadership team. And it's not just safety. It might be the claims person. It might be the HR, of getting HR the resources. Remember, P4 is pre-hire, post-offer prevention, and post-claim. We've got to make sure we get the resources for all four tires. We don't just load it up on safety. If we give it all on safety and we don't have a good firewall at time of hire, for example, we talked last month about integrity testing. We use a third-party vendor. So it's really our job to put these pieces together and then strategize it with the leadership team and decide who's going to pay for it. The one point I want to make is you can't outsource your risk management. We asked the question, we'll ask it again next month, who manages the cost of a claim? And I've asked this question for about 20 years. And I used to say it's 75% the employer, 25% the insurance carrier. But when I asked the insurance carrier, Tuesday I did an adjuster training, a big adjuster training class, for nothing but adjusters. And I asked them, they think they manage the claim on workers' comp. And clearly, if you go through P4 and you talk about leadership, pre-hire, post-offer, prevention, all those things are all carried by the employer, all have an impact on the cost of the claim. And then when you get post-claim, it's still not all the insurance company. There's a lot of things that the employer has to do. So I just want to tell you, no matter who your broker is, who your insurance carrier, you've got to have a plan that you take ownership. With us, we've got a big talented team. I love our risk management team. I love our producers, but we got support from a risk management team, but we're just guides. We just give, it's your employees. We just give really good guidance. Okay. So I want to talk the last 25 minutes. I start preaching about taking ownership. We've got a thing we call a risk score. And it's something I started back in 2010. And I really just did it as a way to organize our assessment. And we do it based like a credit score, 850 points. And we divide it up and you can see the points. And we've got, questions we go through and we grade it out. Okay. This is our onboarding assessment with a prospect. Okay. And so, Eddie asked the question, well, why is leadership, if it's so important, got only 150 points? If you go through the survey questions, you'll see there's a lot of leadership things in pre-hire, post-offer prevention, post-claim. So it's not all front-loaded on that leadership. The whole survey and assessment is heavily weighted toward leadership and accountability. So, what we're looking for is to take clients from good to great. I will tell you this, and this isn't a sales pitch for EIG. I think it's, it's easily shown and we can prove it. If you're a prospect and you look how your account is marketed, it's basically loss runs and a narrative and an application and some exposure data, and you go out and get quotes. We take a different approach. We forensically look at your past, where you are. We learn a lot in the past. We look at old claims and we kind of unpack it. And a lot of times, candidly, what we find is it wasn't the insurance company that dropped the ball. A lot of times it was the employer didn't know what they could have done on their side of the fence, on their 75 or 80 or 85% that they control. So we look at the past and we kind of say, okay, where are you at? The claim Eddie just mentioned, we see clients with a bad claim, they change their policy on that one claim. So it won't happen again on that one incident. What we're really looking for is organizationally you're changing. Like, let's address stuff before it happens. So when I see an organization that's poor, we got a lot of foundation stuff. When I see somebody that's good, it's easy to get to great. When we see a company that is doing a lot of things really well to get them to exceptional, we've got some really, really good tools. That's when the magic happens. So our goal is to just move them along this journey and think about it like a credit score. You might be a 500 right now. So our goal is to get you to 600. More importantly, we have a plan and we can show the insurance carrier our plan. And we've got credibility that we actually do this stuff so the insurance company will kind of look at where your credit score is today based on our plan, where you're going to be 12 months from now. And we can get some favorable pricing, we think, because they know we're going to be intentional on our stewardship. So,
Hey, Zach, they're asking
Uh,
about keywords.
Yeah, just really quick, I think one of the keywords got passed over in a slide. So the first keyword was perception. So please, if you're collecting your CEU credits, write down the word perception now. You'll use this keyword when you fill out the program eval. There will be one more keyword that's going to come up later in the session, but the first one is perception. So please make note of that, and then we will get you the second keyword shortly.
good job. Good job. Yeah, we want to make sure you get your CEU credit. I know how mad you guys get. I had to file a CE yesterday on a bunch of people, and if we don't get it filed the same day, they get upset. So some of the questions on the safety of what we're talking about today is, how often do you conduct safety training? We've got kind of a training roadmap. We look at not only how often you do it, but what is the quality? How are you reaching your people? And this is what I know. I'm an old guy. I'm having to completely reinvent myself. I can't do things the way I did 20 years ago. I'm starting to use AI. I thought I never would. If you're doing your training the way you did 20 years ago, you're probably not reaching your employees. So you've not only got to think about how much you do it, the quantity is, you got to look at the quality. Okay. And then, when you look at your annual safety policy, review it every year. Less is better. I like a thinner policy, and then let's do regular training and backfill it with micro learning And then that leadership, we want to see that you're talking about safety to your leadership team at least quarterly, preferably every month. So that's the kind of things we look for. And we've got a lot of tools to fill in how we do this stuff. So, where do you start? Gosh, man, we don't really have anything. Where do we start? Well, first thing, how we start is we build a program structure. We look at where you're at and we look at the foundation. And that usually starts with, hey, let's get written policies and procedures. Okay, and less is better. I mean, if it's only 5 pages long, that's cool. If it's 50 pages, whatever fits your company, let's start with that. And let's get the employees to understand that. Put in place supervisor leadership training. And then, we're a big proponent of microlearning. If you're not using microlearning, I said this yesterday, it's kind of like, with cyber, used to be with cyber insurance, everybody wanted dual authentication. Well, if you don't do it now, you're not getting cyber coverage. 10 years ago with a fleet, you needed telematics. They said, hey, put in telematics, but they didn't force it. You could get a little bit of a discount if you did it. Now it's table stakes. I think microlearning in the next couple of years is going to be table stakes, that employers understand that costs are going up every year and they got to take control of it, and they got to do a better job of really impacting the employees. And there's a lot of platforms out there. I will tell you, there's a lot of telematics platforms out there for your fleet. We're pretty good guides of helping our clients find the right platform, because there's a lot of software vendors out there that'll sell you a platform that might not be right for you.
We got a little bit of time. Can you just go through micro learning just very quickly what it is?
I'm going to actually on the next slide after this.
Perfect.
I'm going to talk about it from just on a couple of slides. But we talked about this program structure. This is kind of what we look at: policy and procedures, training, hazard identification, making sure you have a good incident reporting, whether it's fleet or general liability or particularly workers' comp, and training on those things. So when we think about training, a lot of times we're thinking about OSHA training and safety training, but you've also got to train on, hey, when something happens, think about it like you guys down in South Florida, you do hurricane drills. Planning, if you have a hurricane, you got to do the same thing for your incidents. Plan ahead, educate them. I mean, think about your drivers if you got a big fleet. A lot of them, man, they don't know what to do when they have a claim. They miss critical evidence for us to help us take zeros off the claim file. Trust me, if we just nick another car, particularly in South Florida, it's going to be a big claim. So teaching them what information to get at the time of the accident is critical. And then having regular meetings to discuss safety and claims. That's kind of the program structure. So Eddie asked the question about microlearning. And I want you to think about this again. I'm the chief perspective officer. So I want you to think about this. This is not me. This is a study done by CEB. They said that about 50% of training is learning scrap. So you set your employees in and do 30 minutes of safety training, 15 minutes of that was wasted. Also the 15 minutes to get them there and the 15 minutes to get them back to work. So you basically got almost an hour and you're really only getting 15 minutes of value. But when you do training, they're going to forget 90% of what they learn if there's not reinforcement within 30 days. 90%. There's no way to drive accountability. And so what we do is we recommend, even if you do live backfill it with microlearning. So you train them. You can train them through the microlearning and then do an additional class or two. You can do supervisor-led training and then have a reinforcement training through microlearning. But when you do, you're able to improve accountability and you get a huge return on your involvement. And not investment, but involvement is the investment, you're going to get a 200% return on your investment with microlearning. But what I like to see is you pull people together, maximize your time. We have a little thing we talk about in EIG. We try to help companies do it better, faster, cheaper. Better, faster, cheaper, because time's money. So we put everything on a clock. How can we help you optimize your training in a way that you're intentional with it? You get the point across to the employees and you do it seamlessly in the least amount of time. Okay, when we talk about developing our learning plan, these are the steps you need, okay? And so we go in and review your learning methods. You know, Eddie says this all the time, we got to meet the employees where they are. And that's different within companies. So we got to understand, you know, one of the things we're really good at is we understand multicultural workplaces. And so our tools are very adaptive to different languages and whatnot. So we look at that and we evaluate the program, we review training resources, and we develop a learning plan. Most importantly, and what I want to focus on is step 5, I call it stewardship. And I want you guys to circle this on your notes, stewardship. If you guys are doing a good job of training, make sure your insurance broker knows to get that information to the underwriter. You know, most underwriters don't have a clue what you're doing. They don't know. And the broker sure doesn't know because he's not involved in your program. So you got to let them know. If you're really intentional on your learning plan regarding safety and risk management, you got to get the bullhorn out and let them know. It will have a huge impact on your pricing. Because all they really have is your losses. If they don't know what you're doing, all they have is your losses. So when we talk about micro learning, Eddie asked about it. What I like about it is it's small bites out of the apple. You can hit them with a 2-minute, 3-minute on their phone. It's got like a 97% adoption rate. I mean, just about everybody in your workforce has a smartphone. And most of the smartphones and most of the micro learning platform we use changes the language based on the setting of the employee smartphone. So it's a way to get messaging out regularly with not a lot of effort. Push it out to their phone. You can do it once a week, twice a month. They get messages. What it says is, hey, these guys care about me. They're pushing these messages out. And if it's good messages, hopefully you're going to get them to follow rules. You know, when you get a micro learning platform, you know, not all they're basically learning management systems or LMSs are created equal. You know, the one we use also does safety assessments and incident analysis. So if you're considering this, make sure you put some thought into picking the right platform. It's no different than your telematics. You know, once you get it, it's a big investment to get the telematics put on all your trucks and actually adopt it and how to use it. We're very strategic about that as well, but it's the same thing with microlearning. And if you get the right microlearning platform, it can actually connect with your telematics. So if employees are having bad behavior out on the road, it can automatically shoot them training. There's a lot of advancements in technology. And again, you know, if you're a client of EIG or prospect of EIG, reach out to your person that invited you to the webinar, and they can tell you more about how we can help you on these things. Okay.
Yeah, we have a much shorter attention span these days. I mean, being a millennial, I remember as a kid up until now, as the technology improves and everything's right at your fingertips, we don't pay attention that long. So that's why that micro learning is also so important, is that you need to be able to engage with them quickly, because you lose them if you go on too long for something.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. We haven't lost anybody. I'm looking at the numbers on there.
The number seems to keep going up as we go. I think people are
it's crazy.
inviting other people during the session and having
I
them
think
join
somebody's
in.
saying, hey, man, this is really good. Joe, you need to get on this webinar. No, I'm kidding. So let's wrap up here on when we talk about safety meetings. Like, I hate meetings. The EIG team knows I hate meetings because we pull people together. They're out of work. You know, everybody, it's like, let's be focused. When you have a meeting with supervisors, you got to explain why. You got to create KPIs. KPIs are simple. If you create the right KPIs for supervisor, things like, hey, and this is getting your loss information from your broker. And for example, looking at things like litigation, lag time of reporting, and you start measuring those things and you have a report, and in your supervisor leadership, you pass that report and say, hey, this supervisor, the claims are being delayed reporting more than the others. You're sort of calling them out because they see the statistics of everybody. They're going to start getting on board. And then leadership training. For a safety committee, if you do create a safety committee, have an agenda. of what you're trying to do. I see so many safety committees start with a bang and end with a fizzle because they don't really have a plan of what they're doing. And then with your insurance carrier or your TPA, if you're in a captive, what you've got to do is let them understand the plan. They need to understand. Remember, I said about letting your broker know if you're doing training, they got to understand what you're doing to be top of stack. Pricing is very subjective from insurance companies. It's not going and getting the cheapest quote. It's getting a quote from a good carrier that understands you best. And then, in claim reviews, being, intentional about claim reviews, be productive versus just, beating the claim down the road. Okay.
Steve, quick question. Do you recommend having more than one safety committee within the organization?
That's a great question. I've actually got a white paper on that, Zach. I can send to you, and anybody's interested, I can give to you. In some larger organizations, sometimes I see as many as 4 different safety committees. There could be a safety committee on OSHA. There could be a safety committee on planning an annual safety day. There could be an annual a committee on looking at the assessments out in the plant, for example. So some organizations actually break it up and they get more involvement from more employees, get some bigger buy-in. So great question. I've got a great white paper on that. If you want to copy that, just ping Zach or Eddie and they can send that how to build a safety committee.
Yeah, and someone was just asking in the chat if they can get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. And yes, definitely, if you want a copy, ask for it after the session. You could email us and we'll give you a copy of it.
I thought they only got a copy of it if they took Eddie and me out to lunch. No. Eddie, that was a joke.
Yeah.
All right. We got another polling question. This is just a pop quiz because you do have the survey, but this just makes us feel good or bad depending on how you answer it. Actually, yesterday I did this session for a large group and I had one person say it was okay. And it was somebody that worked for me. And they said, man, we just want to mess with you. And I'm like, we track all this stuff. So, what we want, again, is you might be looking at this and saying, well, I don't really have anything to do with safety. I hope what you'll do with this conversation is take this information back to your company and just start a dialogue. What I see a lot of times with HR, particularly in a large company where I got claims and I got HR and I got safety and it's 3 silos. And everybody thinks, gosh, you're a humongous company. You must have it all figured out. But the bigger the company, the more siloed things get. Small companies, you got one person has to wear 8 hats. That's challenging too. But the big companies don't have it all figured out either. And one of the things you can do, I'm pushing you guys, this is a David, but I want to hold a risk workshop. I do it here in Georgia every year. We're going to hold one down in South Florida where you guys get to come and sit with each other and talk about these things. I think peer-to-peer is awesome. No company, I work with hundreds. I'm fortunate enough, I work with hundreds of large companies on the risk management plans. So I get a lot of perspective and I try to share what I learned from all the different companies. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I just make sure I'm in a room with smart people. You guys within your own company have that too. Get the people in the room and talk about these things and be intentional on it. So, all right, we got the poll.
Okay, the polling results are in. So we have 92% say, oh yeah, 8% said it was okay, and no one said not really.
Yeah.
So at least we got no not reallys.
Thank you for that. Yeah, not really. Somebody said, hey, I thought this was going to be on Fleet. No.
Also, just to give the second keyword is safety. So if you're collecting the CEUs, you'll need the second keyword, safety. We're going to give you the link to the program eval in just a moment, so if you just hang on with us. The first keyword was perception, and the second keyword, safety. So you need those 2 keywords when completing your eval, perception and safety.
So let me just kind of wrap up by saying this. First of all, thank you for taking time out of your busy day. We mentioned we've got this assessment. We love if you're a client, this is something new in our training. What we've done is we've streamlined our assessment. You guys have probably been through our long assessment. We've tried to shorten it, make it simpler for clients, but also be very intentional with it. If you're a prospect, it's sitting down, taking 30 minutes with someone to kind of go through and look at your pre-hire, post-offer, prevention, and post-claim and your leadership programs. And what we do is we just give you a grade, a score, and we have, kind of an improvement plan. So if you're interested in that, please reach out. I appreciate everybody taking time. Zach, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, let's see. Is there any other slides you have on there?
I don't think so. I think
Okay, so let me go ahead and I'll share my screen so we can get the QR code up there, get the program eval, and then of course we have to spin the wheel because we got some prizes we need to give out. So let me go ahead and share my screen so we can get this going to finish.
While you do
up the
that,
session.
I'm gonna read a question that was in the question and answer section of this webinar. How do you approach or have one-on-one serious conversation with the owner of the company as a supervisor on certain workers when you're getting good production? And sometimes that matters most to your owner.
I think the answer is, I've seen so many good employees that cut corners on safety, catastrophically injured or killed. And when that happens, that owner can't sleep at night, and it could have been prevented. And it's tough. And what I do is I try to bring that perspective when I go talk. So when I'm having the conversation in our supervisor training and I get that feedback and I'm sitting down with the owner, I'm saying, look, I've had this happen. I mean, I've had so many death claims, and everyone leaves a mark on me, but certainly on the owner of the company. So we just try to bring that experience and that perspective to get the owners to understand, man, it is about production. Listen, if you're not making profit, you're not in business. But a close second has got to be your people. Okay. That's why we call it people risk management. We know you got to make money. We think a lot of things we do can help companies actually be more efficient, more profitable, less turnover, all those other things to make more money, training better, faster, cheaper. But at the end of the day, you've got to have ownership understand. I mean, you can't lose somebody. All right, Zach?
Okay, so we're just getting the screen here sharing because we had multiple screens sharing. 1 second.
We got Eddie, like large in charge. Man, Eddie, hey man, that little, hey, man, I got to tell you something, man. So I've got trademark safety IQ and claims IQ. I'm going to embarrass Eddie. And Zach, I saw their glam photos for our website. And I said, we calling them GQ now.
All right, let's spin the wheel. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right, so we have everyone here who's in the room on the wheel. We're going to spin the wheel. ADP was kind enough to sponsor one of our door prizes. So we're going to first spin for a $50 Amazon gift card from ADP. So here we go. We're going to spin the wheel. Let's pick the winner. Okay, the suspense. Brian, you are the winner. Congratulations. You have won the first gift card. Okay, and then EIG is sponsoring a second $50 Amazon gift card. So let's spin the wheel.
Way to go, Brian. I thought it was going to be a new Maserati, but
Let me tell you, Brian has participated in a lot of these webinars. It went to a great person.
Pablo, you are the second winner.
awesome.
Oh, wow. Awesome. I was
Okay,
with Pablo today.
Okay, perfect. All right, so thank you everyone for joining us. I think this was a great session, very insightful. I'm excited for our next session on claims because that's something that's a topic I love, of course, something I have a lot of experience in. So I can't wait to see what we have in store for our next CEU course. And until then, everyone stay safe out there, and we will see you soon.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.